Good morning, everyone. Just wondering, in the audience, do we have anyone from senior management at C-level, chief marketing officers, CEOs, anyone like that? Yeah? Okay, cool. What about marketing people? Any marketing people here? Okay, excellent. Sometimes I think that marketing managers are their own worst enemies when it comes to social media. They bound up to the CEO and say, right, we're going to start with social media, we're going to start with a Facebook page, and then wonder why the CEO begins to question everything that they're trying to do with regard to social media. Too often we jump in feet first into social, usually with a Facebook page, without thinking about the broader consequences of social media, both from an operational point of view as well as communications point of view. People see social media as a marketing tool and not necessarily as a business tool. Two of the biggest challenges that marketers commonly encounter when they're getting their organizations involved with social media is lack of buy-in from key stakeholders, such as other departments, as well as CEOs, for instance. And the second challenge they face, key challenge, is a lack of preparedness and operational know-how, both from within their own team as well as from other teams. So this chat today is aimed at trying to assist you with perhaps a way forward in order to obtain that buy-in and clear some of the challenges at the outset. The three main things that we'll focus on today in this chat is interdepartmental integration, so how to get all of the other departments on board, which can be just as big a challenge, if not more, than getting the CEO on board. The second challenge that solution that we'll discuss is planning and how to go about effective planning. And lastly, we'll end with obtaining the CEO's buy-in. So when it comes to interdepartmental integration, you really need department heads' buy-in. And the reason for that is that social media is not just about marketing and communications. It often touches on every single aspect of the business, from sales to research and development to customer service to the legal team, and even down to the factory floor and operations. So start by becoming a really, really good listener. Identify which departments could possibly be impacted by social, and go and meet with your peers. Sit down with the department heads, go grab them for a coffee, and begin by understanding what their business needs are. The trick with this is to engage your stakeholders, the business heads, at the point of conceptualization of social media, not when it's fait accompli. So don't go to them with a complete social media plan and say, okay, and this is what you guys are going to be doing, or okay, this is what I'm going to be doing, therefore, there you go, that's it, deal with it. You want to engage them as stakeholders. Look out for advocates, seek out champions and people that actually get social media, and really make it a work in progress with them. Also, do couch social media in terms of their own business needs. And the way to couch social media in terms of their business needs is to firstly understand what they are. So let's look at a few departments. So when we have a sales team, sit down with the sales team and understand what their lead generation strategy is, how they go out and find new business. Give them insight into what other organizations are doing in terms of how they're using social media in order to generate leads. Twitter, for instance, LinkedIn can be very good platforms to look at with regards to sales. Also consider understand what their after-sales service is like, and give them some insight into how social media can help with after-sales service. If we're looking at customer service, which is a natural follow-on from sales, is understand the challenges that they face, understand the volume of calls or requests that come in, understand the frequency of certain topics, and give them some insight into how social media can work for them from a one-to-many level. So say you're a telco, for instance, and the service goes down. A customer service team may spend upwards of a day of just handling the same sorts of questions, however, if you have a social media plan in place that brings in customer service to this, or we can have proactively some customer service information that's going on to say the service is down at the moment. These are the steps that we're taking to rectify it. Please feel free to contact us on this number. However, you may be able to use social media to reduce the volume of calls and free your customer service team up for other important issues. If you have a research and development team or an insights department, find out what they measure and how they're measuring. They might be doing, for instance, research premised on street intercepts, on focus groups. Social media can be regarded as one of the biggest focus groups in the world. You can be using your social media channels, be it by Facebook polls or questions on Twitter or on LinkedIn or a number of different outlets, to ask your audience questions about your product or service, glean insights. Perhaps you have a creative campaign running with two concepts and you want to know what is going to work with your audience. That's one way to go about it. Another way to go about it is to use social media monitoring tools to understand what people are saying about your business or your product or your service or the category or your competitors unprompted. So, for instance, say you have a skincare product that you're thinking about launching. Say it's for oily skin. You might want to conduct a social media audit to understand what people are saying about skincare in the summer, what are their home remedies, what products they recommend. So it can be really useful for research and development. And this is how you begin to get buy-in, by understanding the business from each departmental head's perspective and understand where and how social can help. From an HR point of view, I'm sure we've all looked for candidates before on LinkedIn. I'm sure we've all stalked a few people. I'm sure you all use LinkedIn for your own professional purposes as well. Understand how your HR team currently seeks talent and what their strategy is, as well as what tools they're using. Perhaps they're using LinkedIn, perhaps they're using Twitter. Also discuss with them the need for a social media policy as well within the organisation, and how that ties into the broader employee policies in place. And work with them on that. So a social media policy doesn't come from HR and it doesn't come from communications. It always needs to be a joint effort there. Second to last is the legal team. I deal with the legal teams with the organisations that I look after often, sometimes on a weekly basis. You need to really align with them on the potential issues that you're going to face and have them on board ready to help. This may include things like reviewing scenario plans. So before you get involved in social, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but creating social plans for potential issues and having legal review them. Also understanding what kind of legal team you've got. Most organisations have a corporate legal team on board. However, for social media, you may need to work with media lawyers as well. So understanding what level of comfort they have with things like IP and media law is really important. Lastly, understand how the operations team works. So this may be thinking about how malleable the factory floor is, understanding if there's any historical issues that they've had to deal with, if they've ever had to stop production, if it's a product, if they've ever had to recall any services, how flexible they could be to things like crowdsourced ideas, crowdsourced product or service ideas, and get them on board. So that's essentially a few pointers on how to get the departments on board from the outset. You need your team of aligned stakeholders so they understand, and again, couching it to their needs, the sort of what's in it for me aspect, where they can understand how you and them can create a social media strategy that helps them do their job better. The next thing you need to consider when dealing with internal issues is planning. And I can't overstate the importance of planning. There's a lot that you need to consider before even thinking about what platform that you need to get involved with. It's absolutely crucial to success in that every single award-winning campaign that we've ever done on social media, every single one has been backed up with some solid planning. And here's some of the things you need to think about that. Firstly, conduct a feasibility study. So Meeting with your departmental heads is one part of that. Understanding where some of the roadblocks might be, where some of the opportunities might be within the organisation. You need to also consider business readiness. So how quickly can we get involved in social? What sort of resources do we need, both in terms of human resources? What sort of stakeholders maybe do you need within that organisation? So do we need to train up some of your customer service people for social? Also from a financial point of view as well, it can get really expensive really quickly. Think also about scalability. So often, organisations worry about what if their social media is not a success. From our experience, often you need to think about what happens if your social media is too successful, so that you've got an issue with scalability. From this point of view, we'd recommend adopting a beta type of mindset to social. So don't think about starting off with a Facebook page and a Twitter page and a YouTube channel and, this. Start small. Think about socializing your website, for instance, having social media news releases. Consider, perhaps a Twitter, but just go into it very easily so you can make sure that you can internally scale this. Think also about a social media audit. Patrick, who's going to be speaking after me, is going to be talking a lot about data and actionable insights from the data on social media. I'll touch on this very briefly. With a social media audit, you can uncover some amazing things. For instance, you might want to know what your competitors are doing. You might want to understand what people think about your competitors, what your share of voice is on social, what your competitors' share of voice is on social, what some of the brand perceptions are, what some of the issues are, what some of the opportunities are. Also, very importantly, you want to understand where your audience is. So while it's all well and good to think, we're totally going to open up a Facebook page and Twitter to get in touch with our 32-year-old bullseye target market female in Saudi Arabia. However, a social media audit might bring up, and will likely bring up, that those conversations aren't being held on Facebook and Twitter. They're in fact being held on, say, forums. Exactly. So a social media audit is going to cast a lot of light into where to go, what to do, and help you understand any issues, any opportunities, and to be able to create messaging strategies around that. It will also help you identify who your key audiences are, who the key influencers are, and what they're saying. So you've got that roadmap laid out. Social media guidelines are absolutely essential for the organisation. When we talk about social media guidelines, it's not don't do this and don't do that and we're going to restrict you and clamp you down. Do try and let it be a lot more proactive, positive, engaging, essentially empowering. If you want some social media guidelines or policies, can range from 10 points to a 14-page document. If you want some examples of some social media guidelines or policies, have a look online. Just type it into Google. You'll see some really simple ones from Best Buy's social media guidelines to some really complex ones, such as BBC's. Really sanity check the social media guidelines, and as I said before, work with the HR team on this as well. Issues management and crisis communications. If you have a PR team, be it an agency or a PR department, work really closely with them. If you're a well-established organisation, you should already have an issues and crisis manual, which basically outlines what to do when things go awry. Don't think for a minute that things aren't going to go wrong on social media. They will. We deal with all sorts of things constantly. I've done events before where the PR person's been like, internal PR person, this is in a former life, no, it's not going to happen. Everything's going to be fine. The next thing you know, there's a problem with the aircraft and emergency landings have had to have taken place, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning in this region and we've not been able to reach the client, had to sort it out ourselves. Everything you can think of will go wrong, so plan for it. And this is where scenario planning comes in as well. We write pages and pages and pages of scenarios. This is essentially so that what a scenario plan is an employee gets hold of a disgruntled employee gets hold of your Facebook passwords or starts to launch their own attack on social media. It's things like your product has been contaminated, your sports person has had a heart attack, and what we do is we plan out what those holding statements are going to be. And they're absolutely crucial, because if we don't do that level of planning, then when a crisis hits, nobody knows what to do. And with the crisis management plan, you have a working model so that, for instance, if any of my guys in the team find an issue, they know that they need to call me on the phone no matter what time of the day or night it is. They know that they need to start taking screenshots. They know that they need to monitor that sort of issue. They know that they're not allowed to talk to anyone about the issue, that I'm the only person that can speak with the client and my agency stakeholders. It's having that workflow in place, because otherwise when an issue comes up, everybody is trying to solve it, and it often turns into a bit of a nightmare. The way in which you handle a crisis is just as important as the crisis itself from that respect. Also consider investment in your planning. So what sort of tools are you going to need? For instance, if you've got a customer service team, you may want to look at some tools that can handle multiple users dealing with a number of different issues. So tools such as Hootsuite or CodeTweet could be appropriate for you. Look at social media monitoring tools. It is an investment, and one that you need to plan for as well. And also think about your HR needs. It's not a case of getting your intern to do it. You really do need somebody that has experience in online communications to handle this, at the very least communications. At this stage, only then can you begin to look at your marketing plan or at your communications plan and start thinking about the campaigns that you're going to be running. Think about your content calendars. Think about the tone of voice. Don't think campaign first, think program first. You need to look at this as an ongoing relationship development tool with your key audiences. And lastly, I think on this sort of point, the most important thing to do is make sure that social media ties into your business objectives. Social media is not just a sort of a fun, tactical tool. You know, you need to understand what are the key business objectives that we need to obtain this year, and how can social media help us achieve them. And by speaking with your interdepartmental heads, you're going to have a number of different perspectives on that hopefully tie into the overarching business strategy. So the key here is to plan for operational success so that you can experience social media success. And as you can see now, we've dealt with the interdepartmental heads. We've now gone through the planning phase. And it's only at this time that you can really start to make that business case to take to your CEO. So when you talk to your CEO, think like a CEO. Be very empathetic. What do CEOs tend to think about? They tend to think, and CEOs in the audience, feel free to correct or add to any of these things as well. So CEOs tend to think about obtaining and retaining the very best of breed. They want to be driving efficiencies in the organization. They want to be maximizing revenue opportunities, driving profitability, thought leadership, maintaining a competitive edge, as well as innovation. The objective of social media has to be able to tie into that and to drive those business results. So make a business case for social media. Approach this from your CEO's perspective. Make life easier for him or her. Research and understand, and most importantly, articulate how social media can be used to help solve business issues that they think about on a day-to-day basis, and have some case studies to back it up. And there's many out there. Have your CEO understand how social media can make his or her life easier and also more interesting as well. There's never a dull moment in social, that's for sure. Couch it in his or her terms. So couch social from a business perspective. Don't also assume that a CEO knows nothing about social media. Conversely, don't expect that a CEO knows anything about social media. So just speak in very clear, very succinct terms. Please do not go to them with a whole host of, 3-letter acronyms and try and outsmart them. It's not going to work and it will blow up in your face. I've seen some rather amusing cases of that in my time. So I think here really the key is to make that business case and make sure you take everybody on that journey with you, that it's not you operating in a silo, that you've got buy-in from all of the key stakeholders, that you've done your research. Don't be your own worst enemy, make life easier for yourselves. And I think that is how you'll achieve the two key issues, which is a lack of buy-in from the key stakeholders as well as a lack of preparedness. We've probably got about 10 minutes? Maybe 5 or 10 minutes? Does anyone have any questions, any sort of challenges that they face?
You're a closer.
I think one of the main challenges people have is the fact that there's just a plethora of channels that one can use in social media, and your point of adopting a beta approach to it where, you build on it. I think in order to understand the success of your first channel, you need to be able to monitor it, as you were saying. So the service providers that you've seen in the Middle East, when it comes to media monitoring here, and I think specifically for a lot of us, it's important that we have Arabic social media monitoring as well. What have you seen that's available, and what would you recommend?
That's a really, really good question. There's very few social media monitoring services that do things correctly. There's a couple of global ones that people might be using, such as Radian 6. Radian 6 does not monitor in Arabic. Sysomos says that they monitor in Arabic. They don't. The Arabic's all broken up and it's not even Arabic. We have our own proprietary tool, and we also work with Socialize. That's part of Media Watch.
Algerian SM2.
Pardon me?
Algerian SM2.
Thank you. That's where I was coming to next. We also work with Alterian, which is SM2 or TechRigi. Click Media is here in one of these boxes. They are the local on-the-ground people for the is it actually? No, sorry, no. I'm getting confused. Click Media has another tool which is also extremely good, and that's based on a technology called Statsit. Statsit only works with agencies though, so you'll have to work with your agencies and if you're to work with them. And all of the others, be it Meltwater, etc., none of those are up to scratch. So feel free to speak to me about this, because this is something that we do across all of our clients. It's a cost of doing business. You don't want to be across every social channel. You need to know basic rule of marketing. Be where your audience is. You need to understand where that audience is, and most importantly, monitor in Arabic and English. Just one point to add to that as well is you can work with tools that have all the pretty dashboards and automate everything. It's not the way to go. You need to work with an organization that has analysts as well as the computer, as well as the mechanics, because sentiment analysis and the more qualitative aspects of social media monitoring can't be done by a computer. It can only go so far, because if I say, I think Pepsi's really cool, and you say, I've gone cool on Pepsi, that can mean two completely different things, and so you need the analysts to be able to define what that is. There's some jobs a computer just can't do.
Okay, and just to add to this, media monitoring. We do social media as well, and Sysomos does do Arabic, but you need to know what you're doing in terms of search. We worked with them for some time.
Yeah.
So the problem with Arabic is that if you don't know what you're looking for yourself, you have to have someone who knows what they're doing and they know the language very well, because they're computer systems, so they know how to read the characters, but you need to figure out the variations and how to set things up. And that's what you're talking about, when you need people on the ground who know what they're talking about, instead of, you can always get a very cheap tool to do what you want. But if you don't know how to use it and you don't have the support on the ground, it's not going to work.
Well, we have a team of 22 social media people in my department, and all of them, bar 3 of them are Arabic writers and speakers. So we also look at these tools and evaluate them from that perspective. So maybe the sample that we got in was not correctly set up by Sysomos, but we weren't taken with it at all.
Next.
Hi.
Hi.
Your presentation talked about how to get the buy-in from the CEO. Okay? So let's for a minute assume that buy-in is not the issue. The CEO wants to do it.
Yeah.
What's the first thing that you need to do to actually kickstart it? And specifically on the human resource front, who's the first person that the company needs to hire to actually start off a whole social media business within the organization?
Well, I think that what I said in terms of first speaking with your key stakeholders and auditing is going to give you a really big insight into what sort of volume of work you're going to be looking at. Do you need to take somebody on internally? Do you need to engage an agency? It's going to help you out with that sort of scalability issue. You know, the advantage of, for instance, working with an agency is that if there's an issue or if there's a huge campaign, we can throw resources behind it to be able to get behind it. I can give you some tips in terms of the sorts of people that you should be looking for. They should come from a marketing communications background, ideally a communications background. They should be fluent in both English and Arabic, and they should have a really good social profile as well. So many people, you know, talk the talk, but they don't really walk the walk. So first of all, start off with talking to your departmental heads. That social media audit is also a really big indicator of what you're going to be up against.
Yeah. Is that satisfactory?
Hi.
Hi.
I have two questions. One quick. Would you recommend for a startup business to use social media, or once they are really known in the market, to use the social media as a first step? Okay. The other question, I work in the IT field as a CIO, and usually I face this problem because whose responsibility to follow up with the social media? Is it the people who are running the show as a social media, or at the end of the day, this is a cloud computing service?
It's what, sorry? What's
It's a cloud computing service. That's to say, Facebook, Twitter, all this infrastructure, I don't own them. I am a customer at the end of the day. So the responsibility about the contents, the security, and any consequences, okay, is it a responsibility from the IT people or the marketing team? Thank you.
What was your first question again? Sorry?
The startup business.
Startup business. Oh, okay. Just seriously, just Google startups and social media, and you'll see that case after case, social media is a beautiful tool for startups. It offers a way to get in touch with potential partners, customers from a very cost-effective point of view, and it's also that thought leadership as well that can really do you some favors. In terms of who owns social media and who should control that, that should be your marketing communications team. And if you've got a marketing team and a communications team, we'll have them work together. It shouldn't be the responsibility of IT.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. I just want to share one thing, and I need your tips, so to speak. One of my biggest challenges is actually convincing, let's say, the CEO that the PR company and social media manager should work together to get what we need. Well, to get what we need to get. The thing is, the CEO himself keeps telling me, isolate yourself from the PR company. Do not go to the PR company. And I'm finding it really, really hard to actually go in there, convince him that we should work together. We actually have to find a PR company that understands social media. How would you go on, you know?
In my previous incarnation, I was a head of digital at a PR agency. My take on this is nobody owns social media. You need to look very carefully at your content and what content you can get from where. So PR is a fantastic content source. You should be working with your PR agency, working with your advertising agency, the media agency, your events agency to source content. A mistake that I often see is that organizations just use social media as a way to propagate their PR releases and things like that. That's not necessarily the way to do it, but PR can play an immense valuable role. But by all means, if your CEO wants to isolate social media, that's okay, so long as there is still that interaction, so that every time a press release goes out, you have some understanding or knowledge about what that content is. It's all about content at the end of the day and being able to get the right messages to the right people on social. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Hi. For companies that have a lot of businesses, do you recommend that the social media should be centralized or each business has its own social media team? From experience, I don't know, I felt like we need to have this consistent voice from the vision and the mission of a company, but you have some stakeholders, they say, we know our businesses, so don't come near us. Thank you.
Can I ask you, like, either what company you're with or what your industry is?
Yes, I work at Al Ghanem Industries, which we have more than 30 businesses from electronics retail, home furnishings, industrial, automotive. So social media appeals to electronics, of course, automotive, home furnishings, B2C.
Yeah.
So having this centralized, so we're having this difficulty and whether we should centralize all the activities of social media or let each business manage it, but with guidelines that you've spoken about that we should all follow.
My take on this is you'd probably want an overarching corporate presence, say, but you're talking about very different industries. And so while you might have an overarching corporate presence in terms of that thought, that positioning from a corporate point of view, and this is the hub of organizations that we have, at the same time, I would recommend that each of those businesses has their own individual presence. We work with organizations such as PepsiCo, Beiersdorf, Wrigley's, etc. And we have a different team working on Lay's Arabia, Pepsi Arabia, Doritos, 7-Up, etc. So each of those brands has its own presence. On the other hand, we work with Arla Foods, for instance, which is things like, Three Cows cheeses and Lua Pat butter. We've decided to go with a brand, an overarching brand identity, but I think because that's an FMCG, based on food, it's a little bit easier. We've got a very unique strategy for that organisation. So my recommendation in your instance would be to perhaps have a key champion that sits there from the corporate point of view to make sure that each of those organisations is operating in accordance with your, social media guidelines, and that you, just say if you're that person from the corporate side, that you're sitting with each of those business units to, make sure that their progress is well run. That's all well and good, but I think ultimately you need defined presences.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Meredith Tuqan from Omnicom Media Group.